Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Throne of Steel based on novel. So let's start. The instant the two parties clashed, a bizarre chirping sound reverberated through the stadium. That very instant, all the onwatchers present felt their brains filled in a flash with the chirping sounds before blank scenes flashes through their minds, taking several seconds to recover. That feeling seemed to be seeping out from their soul. It felt like after swaying forth outside for a bit, it returned to their body. This kind of experience was in no way appreciated. These powerhouses from the 6 great temples that Caia had previously faced couldn't help but feel full of shock. How could they have thought that Caia actually had such means at her disposal? This domain technique was just too terrifying. For the defensive barrier to show such a strong reaction, how terrible would it be if that was a direct attack? The dragon summoner and water dragon reached their own conclusion. Inside the stadium a strange scene came to pass. The water dragon and dragon summoner both went stiff, as above their head a blurry figure appeared, shaped the same as them, only a lot smaller. Transparent, lifeless, stiff, and even full of shock. This was without a doubt their soul states, after flourishing lotus flowers took effect. The water dragon's defensive barrier took effect to some extent, but it actually looked not too powerful. Their domain was being dispersed at an astonishing speed as well, along with the defensive barrier. However, after utilizing flourishing lotus flower, Kia also seemed out of strength. Her body swayed in the air, narrowly falling down, but a blue cane appeared in her hand, finally supporting her body. Although from the paleness of her face and her body's lack of spirit, one could see that she already didn't have much fighting strength left. However, she still had a firm look directed at the water dragon and dragon summoner in the air, as if waiting for something to happen. The expelled spirits slowly returned, having in the end not suffered a total purification by flourishing lotus flower. In the end, the water dragon and dragon summoner had joined their spirit force as one, adding that to the overall defensive effects of the domain. So although Kia's blow had great effects on their souls, it was unlikely to go as far as to disperse them. After a dozen seconds, the dragon summoner and water dragon's souls came back to their senses, both out of breath. Even if the water dragon was very powerful, it was still instantaneously weakened to such an extent that it was unable to even maintain its spiritual wings. Falling from the sky and dropping to the ground, it caused a violent bang as the defenses surrounding his body and his domain shattered to pieces. Its soul was weakened such that it was totally unable to control these forces. So who won and who lost? The spectators in the Alliance's great stadium were basically all powerhouses from the 6 great temples. But this instant, almost no one could tell out the outcome of the match. Kia's domain technique benefited in its great unexpectedness, forcibly breaking the water dragon and dragon summoners' joint domain technique, and damaging their very souls. But from the looks of it, Kia did not have any energy left either. Also, the water dragon and dragon summoner should take a bit faster to recover than her. Just as everyone was full of doubts, a white figure suddenly appeared behind the water dragon without any sound, and in a flash was atop the water dragon, a flash of sharp light aiming at the dragon summoner's throat. This timing was really ideal. The dragon summoner having just come back to his senses, and still under the shock from the water dragon's fall, this was a time of thorough distraction. Only when the sharp white glow had reached his throat did he finally react, but that was clearly too late. If that white figure wanted to kill him, he would already be dead. That white figure was clearly Kia, but an illusory Kia, whose sickle of the god of death was lightly pressed against the dragon summoner's throat, before slowly dissipating. Who could expect this? It was only when the victor was already determined that the dragon summoner had finally reacted. This image was visibly a remnant left from before Kia had utilized her domain technique. In other words, she had kept stealthily a doppelganger under the state of invisibility. But which other assassin could maintain an invisible doppelganger? No matter what the dragon summoner was thinking, this match was ultimately his loss. He may not necessarily lose out in strength against the equipmentless Kia, but her victory lay in her bizarre flourishing lotus flower and great planning. She knew very clearly that her flourishing lotus flower came with a massive consumption, stopping her from even continuing to battle. Her doppelganger's preparation was for this very moment. In ordinary circumstances, her doppelganger would by no means be able to injure the opponent, but, because of the shock from the lotus flower's attack, the water dragon's domain was shattered, and thus the dragon summoner was at his weakest state. It was only in search of the best opportunity that Kia had been looking concentratedly at the dragon summoner so far. One could only admit that Kia's strength was really a great deal. Being the saint daughter of Samsara, a god's chosen one, she had powerful abilities beyond the reach of ordinary assassins. For instance, maintaining her doppelganger after using invisibility, and with such great concealment. Even the water dragon's domain did not probe its existence, thus making the summoner's defeat no injustice. Her blue cane tapping on the ground, Kia slowly walked out. The match had already been concluded, and of course, as one of the 6 great temple's powerhouses, the dragon summoner naturally could not act shamelessly, especially with Chen Zidian watching. At this point of the competition, Bright Glimmer of Hope had ended as great victors of the individual competition. 4 spots out of the 6 matches actually belonged to them. Long Houchen stood at the great stadium's entrance, calmly waiting for Kia's return. Looking at her blue cane tapping on the ground, Long Houchen's eyes were full of warmth, visibly recalling the scene of himself sending off Kia every day back then. Kia joined Long Houchen's side, a smile on her face. Her hand pulled by Houchen's, she was supported back to their seats. This time, the light of selection kept going on as Long Houchen unconsciously raised his head. Only the last 2 matches were left for this round, and Bright Glimmer of Hope's captain had yet to take part. However, this light of selection did not target any of the Bright Glimmer of Hope squad, but 2 other competitors, one being a powerhouse from the Night Temple, and the other one from the Spiritual Temple. Therefore, the last match would naturally be between Long Houchen and the last person from the Mage Temple. Seeing that this match was not his own, Long Houchen waved his hand at Han Yu. Han Yu had long since received Long Houchen's instructions. Because he had been eliminated beforehand, he was not inside the competitor's booth, but in the more distant spectators' lounge. Having received Long Houchen's signal, Han Yu lightly nodded, expressing his understanding, before slowly shutting his eyes. No one noticed that among Bright Glimmer of Hope's ranks, Kia, Wang Yuanyuan, and Lin Xin had a golden dot of light on their backs. But by leaning against their seats, this light was thoroughly concealed. Only Bright Glimmer of Hope's people realized what was happening. These were the effects of Han Yu's spiritual stove of light's blessings. Along with his rise in cultivation, Han Yu's spiritual stove of light's blessings had evolved 2 times in total. The current light's blessings was no longer just recovery in a set area. More importantly, Han Yu's blessings could be transmitted to the others through the soul-sharing chains. In a certain range, through the chains he was able to assist his comrades from Bright Glimmer of Hope in recovering spiritual energy. And the fewer the targets, the faster the recovery assistance. The reason why Long Houchen did not signal Han Yu before was naturally, because his spiritual stove could still only be used once a day. So it had to be done in the most crucial instant. Now that the 5th match had already started, Lin Xin, Wang Yuanyuan and Kia all had massive consumptions. And after that, he would have to take part in the 6th match as well, after which the 6th round would immediately start, without leaving them any time for recovery. If Long Houchen had just been picked by the light of selection, to take part in the 5th match, maybe he could delay the use of the spiritual stove of light's blessings a bit as well to profit, but now was clearly the best timing in this situation. The reason why he shifted the activation in advance, was that, as he had the Heart of Eternity, his spiritual energy's recovery was far above the others. No one could deny that Han Yu's boost was a form of cheating. But Long Houchen was tolerant to that, as everything he was doing was for the sake of allowing the Temple Alliance to develop still further. This state of dispersion of the Temple Alliance had already gone on for 6,000 years, and with each of the 6 great temples having its own authority, was a deep-rooted system. They had very complex relationships between each other, and to put that to an end would be a really challenging thing. The only way would be to make them all compromise, but even should it succeed, the qualitative changes would actually most likely not be too huge either. So, Long Houchen had already come to the conclusion that what he had to do was to make Bright Glimmer of Hope really stand above the crowd in this temple's great gathering. Although it had weak foundations, and could only rely on the few of them, they also had their unique advantages. Even after omitting the positions each of them held in their own temple, they had naturally good dispositions. After having experienced so many things, and coming to that point today, Long Houchen believed this to be his unshirkable responsibility. For the sake of his plan, a brand new alliance ought to be founded, where he, as the sign of light, had to become one of the leading figures. Through Bright Glimmer of Hope's drive and strength, they would be the greatest contributors in the alliance's reorganization. In order to achieve this plan, a little fraud was no issue, as the final result was the most important thing. Long Houchen believed that their individual performance had already convinced the overwhelming majority of the alliance's higher-ups. The further they could go in the temple's great gathering, and the higher their result, the more weight they would gain in the meetings after it ended, and the more backing they would receive. The match was continuing fiercely, the spiritual temple and night temple both having only one last person left. This match would determine whether or not they would enter the top 6, which is why the contest was especially fierce. The clashes between these two powerhouses frequently caused cracks to appear on the defensive barrier, which was reinforced continuously by the numerous referees. No one knew that those 3 from Bright Glimmer of Hope were all recovering their spiritual energy at an astonishing speed. The spiritual stove of light blessings continuous recovery was of extremely great use. It was not even only about accelerating their recovery, as Hanyu could even transfer his own spiritual energy through it, transferring an elemental power of extreme purity. This was a matter he had comprehended thanks to absorbing the pure spiritual energy in the Tower of Eternity. With the rise of his cultivation, Hanyu was growing more and more inclined to the supportive type. Even a pure supporter at the 9th step was a considerably powerful existence. And Hanyu had his own goal, which was to become a divine knight. The match went for a whole quarter of an hour. Before the match was finally ended, both sides suffered through a very close match, but in the end that domain-wielding knight was a step ahead and finally managed to achieve victory. But it was a very close victory, with a massive consumption of his spiritual energy, and even his domain had reached its limits. It would visibly take quite a moment for him to recover entirely. Finally, Long Houchen went on stage without need for the light of selection, entering the field alongside that mage. With their results, Bright Glimmer of Hope's performance in the individual stage already reached an unswayable stage. That final night, being really close to his limits, had nearly fainted directly after exiting the stage. With Bright Glimmer of Hope having 3 qualified members, they would very possibly draw him, which would pretty much guarantee them one seat on the top 3. Although Li Jingji was giving his all in recovering his spiritual energy, his previous consumption was considerable. Even if he did make it to the top 3, Bright Glimmer of Hope would very possibly take the final seat, although this would mainly depend on this one match. All knew that Long Houchen was their captain, as well as strongest member. Putting aside his higher chances of victory, should he be eliminated in this match, this mage would definitely not have it easy either. In case Bright Glimmer of Hope should take 2 of the top 3 seats, their 2 members could reject the final 3-person round-robin tournament, so that they could be considered the final champions of the individual competition. Therefore at this point, Bright Glimmer of Hope was in a pretty safe position already. Long Houchen calmly confronted the opposite mage, clad in a yellow gown. That was not a mage's robe, but it clearly illustrated his elemental attribute, as that was an earth mage. The 2 of them exchanged determined glances, before the final match between the top 12 started. Long Houchen did not immediately utilize the light god domain this time. Striding forward, the 6 wings on his back flashed and flapped as his body shot forward like a streak of light. Lightning flash. A golden hexagram slowly extended from where he had been. The divine unicorn slowly appeared behind Long Houchen, shaking its wings to elevate itself high in the air. In the course of launching lightning flash, Long Houchen had already materialized a pair of heavy swords through spiritual highland, launching a cross strike at the opponent. The earth mage was not panicked in the slightest, his hands forming a gesture in front of his chest. Immediately, Long Houchen felt his body sink down, his speed dropping tremendously. That was gravity technique. In the meantime, the Earth Mage aimed a distant palm strike to welcome the distant Houchen, just like a warrior. A terrifying scene arose. A hill over 20 meters tall suddenly appearing in mid-air on its way to collide with Long Houchen. Crossed swords strike landed loudly on that hill, as Long Houchen's body tensed up. In all eyes, Long Houchen should have been able to dodge. Although it came suddenly, and was an instant cast, that hill was really towering and thick. A clash was no good solution. And, just getting out of the way seemed sufficient, as that large hill would not be of great use anyway. But Houchen didn't do so. His body flashed to strike against the hill. Immediately, it stopped in mid-air. The Earth Mage had a chill, knowing that the opponent had seen through his spell. He actually wanted Long Houchen to dodge, as this hill was just a support to launch a powerful gravity technique. But by directly striking the hill, he had visibly cut off that following move. The Earth Mage chanted rapidly, that hill having only stalled for 3 seconds, and a deafening sound of an explosion followed. Countless rocks splattered in all directions as a towering sword intent arose in mid-air. Relying on it, Long Houchen forcibly broke this hill, and the next instant, charged straight toward the mage. His 6 wings provided him with a really enormous speed. Moreover, he had the aid of lightning flash, so the Earth Mage had no way to escape at all. In that case, he may as well not even try. A transparent barrier surrounded his body, which, when struck by Long Houchen's pair of swords materialized from spiritual highland, produced series of sonorous crackling sounds. But that barrier was still unmoving and didn't have any visible trace of damage. What a great defense! If one paid attention, he would realize that the transparent barrier was not like an ordinary magic barrier. It seemed to have countless cuts on its surface, which produced a bright brilliance under sunlight's illumination in the same way as a polished diamond. Starry Diamond Barrier, one of the most powerful defensive spells of Earth Element. Long Houchen was pushed back, but not discouraged. The divine unicorn behind him had already caught up, and a divine light shot out from its horn, glinting on Long Houchen's body, and lit up his body in multicolored light. A torrential sword intent once again burst out from Long Houchen, a severe expression on his face. His heavy swords united above his head, going down in a flash. An earthly yellow halation came up this time from below the Earth Mage. This divine-grade Earth Mage really had great accomplishments in defense. That yellow halo actually enlarged the scope of Starry Diamond Barrier. Clang! Long Houchen was shooed away with his sword, and although a crack had appeared on the Starry Diamond Barrier, it was rapidly restored by the yellow halation within. What a great defense! Long Houchen was startled. In the defensive aspect, this Earth Knight was perhaps not inferior to that supreme shield of the Night Temple. The heart of eternity was pulsing violently. Hearing this Earth Mage still continuously chanting, Long Houchen remained calm, quietly releasing a golden halation. The light god domain finally appeared, and not only that, but right after appearing it started to display the phenomenon associated with the release of the domain technique Divine Light Walls. The look on the Earth Mage's face changed, but his incantation remained unchanging, the yellow halation under his feet only growing even more intense. His domain was named Solidification. A simple-sounding name, but it actually reinforced any of his Earth spells with an ultra-great defense. When young, he was known with the title of Tortoiseshell, absolute number 1 in terms of defense out of the whole Mage Temple. Even Li Jingji would need to expend a lot of magic power to defeat him, relying on the difference in cultivation to win the match. Li Jingji had given him direct instructions on how to deal with the situation before going on stage. For this Earth Mage to defeat Long Houchen with his attacks would be really difficult, so Li Jingji suggested he tire out Long Houchen, who would surely try to achieve a rapid victory, and thus use a lot of his domain's power. Then he was to look for a chance in the midst of stalling. Even if he would end up defeated by Long Houchen, that way he will have certainly depleted a lot of his spiritual energy, thus raising Li Jingji's chances in the rest of the competition. Although Li Jingji knew that should Bright Glimmer of Hope acquire 2 spots on the top 3, there would most likely be no final champion to designate, he still strove for victory with his utmost. In his eyes, although Kia's domain was really bizarre, she was already too much depleted, thus only Long Houchen alone could really make up a threat to him. Long Houchen's Divine Light Waltz having already been launched twice, its volume was clearly smaller than the first time, proof that his spiritual energy was not yet fully replenished. When the Divine Light Waltz and Starry Diamond Barrier collided first, it came immediately to a clash between the strongest attack and greatest defense. An ear-piercing grinding sound came out immediately to everyone's ears. That was really an unpleasant sound. Countless sparks arose from the clash between the two great techniques in the midst of magic and shaking. Divine Light Waltz slowly cut its way in, but it advanced very slowly. All could see that both sides had their spiritual energy depleted intensely. The Earth Mage's incantation became swifter and swifter. As one of the top powerhouses of the Mage Temple, he was unwilling to take a passive beating in front of such a youngster. That was someone whose position was quite higher than even Lin Chen in the Mage Temple. The intense yellow halo from the Starry Diamond Barrier gradually turned muddy, as terrible Earth essence was in the midst of getting compressed and accumulated, about to possibly burst out at any time. But Long Houchen seemed to ignore that. With the boost of the Divine Unicorn, his Divine Light Waltz only grew more and more powerful. The Diamond Starry Barrier already had a small hole in its midst, and the Divine Light Waltz only kept pushing through. At this rate, it would take him at most perhaps 2 minutes to achieve victory against this Earth Mage. Finally, the Earth Mage's incarnation was completed. If he had given all he had in defense, the Divine Light Waltz may have taken longer to pierce its way through, but just to maintain his domain technique's offense, Long Houchen's expenditure of spiritual energy was astronomical. He had to last as long as possible, so that even if Long Houchen finally achieved victory, he wouldn't have much spiritual energy left anyway. But this Earth Mage was just unwilling. After having made it so far, who would give up a chance of achieving victory? So he chose to launch his strongest attack, finally ready. A mini person made of sparkling Earth essence appeared, drilling into the ground immediately. At the time it resurfaced, it had become a gigantic form of Earth essence over 10 meters tall. Shockingly, its body joined with the Starry Diamond Barrier, as if becoming made of diamond. Springing up and joining his fists, he sent it smashing at Long Houchen. Upon its appearance, the Earth essence within the internal barrier of the stadium had risen up dramatically. Like that, he nimbly landed, shifting just enough to evade the horizontal cut from Divine Light Waltz. The corners of Long Houchen's mouth traced a thin smile. This was the chance he was waiting for. If the opponent had only persisted with using his domain's barrier, there would be nothing else to be done than breaking it slowly. But things were not the same with the opponent using this powerful forbidden spell. Perhaps the defensive power of this Diamond Earth Elemental alone was no match for Diamond Starry Barrier. But don't forget, it had yet to benefit from the domain's boost, and was after all a magic that had achieved independence from its master. A purplish-golden radiance flashed through Long Houchen's eyes, and the next instant, a massive figure took shape right above him. Its tail was swung like a hammer, violently whipping the Diamond Earth Elemental. In the meantime, a 6-colored halo flared up. 6-element essence of disorder. The Diamond Earth Elemental could be categorized as an existence reaching the forbidden spell level, yet it was sent flying by that heavy blow. More terrifyingly, when that 6-colored halation was diffused, changes occurred on both the Diamond Earth Elemental and the Mage Starry Diamond Barrier. All the Earth essence pulsed chaotically throughout Essence of Disorder, although the Diamond Earth Elemental was better off, being a supreme Earth Elemental summon. Although Essence of Disorder caused several cracks to appear on its massive body, that did not end up being enough to shatter it thoroughly. Even so, the Earth Mage on the other side was forced back. Originally, when reduced into a state of passive defense by Long Houchen's Divine Light Waltz, he was hoping to rely on the Diamond Earth Elemental to reverse the situation. But who could expect that not only was the situation not reversed, but furthermore, he now had to suffer the attack from the 6-elemental Essence of Disorder. Divine Light Waltz was also somewhat affected, but that domain technique was of a higher level, and furthermore used Long Houchen's supremely pure light, hence it was less affected than his opponent's. Crack! The Starry Diamond Barrier smashed to pieces. Divine Light Waltz now looked about to cut through that Earth Elemental Mage. This Earth Mage kept performing outstandingly. In a flash of white light, the diamond earth elemental shifted its position, arriving in front of him, and blocked divine light walls midway. However, the earth mage's domain was ripped apart alongside the earth diamond barrier. How could it recover instantly? The diamond elemental had a massive wound, earth element having gotten splattered across in front of divine light walls' terrifying cutting force. A body which was originally already full of cracks was almost split in two on the torso level. After divine light walls vanished, Long Houchen swung his sword in the air once again. This time, his body was surrounded by an intense purplish-golden gloss. Sword intent and sword soul were wielded harmoniously, with Hao Yue's bloodline force added to that. A purplish-gold sword light transpired through the sky, making way into that massive wound of the diamond earth elemental. In a flash of yellow light, the earth mage's body flashed across to avoid getting taken down alongside his summon. The diamond earth elemental was extremely powerful offensively, but although it wielded great defense, in the end it was not able to compare with the starry diamond barrier, which benefited from a domain support. The massive body crumbled, smashing to the ground. Hao Yue appeared in front of it once again, sweeping his tail to instantly crush the diamond earth elemental in two, sending fragments flying. At the same time, the 6 huge heads roared, unrestrainedly launching 6 breaths at the earth mage. The earth mage was already quite panicked. The starry diamond barrier couldn't recover in such a short time, as he was having to face Hao Yue's attacks. He was only able to launch series of low-level earth barriers. The battle having reached this point, the outcome was already without suspense. Long Houchen's figure flashed, and he appeared behind the mage as elemental obliterating halo was liberated. The starry diamond barrier could block the elemental obliterating halo. This low-level barrier couldn't withstand it so easily, however. Adding Hao Yue's attacks from the other side, it took only 1 minute for this earth mage to choose to concede. 4th qualification from the Demon Hunt squad, Bright Glimmer of Hope. At this point, Bright Glimmer of Hope had the complete upper hand in this individual competition. They basically only had 1 round left. Although another knight had made it to the top 6, he did not have much strength left, and so the final matter was to see whether Li Jingji would make it to the top 3. In the 5th round, every winner could gain 16 points, thus causing great variations in the total points. Bright Glimmer of Hope had 4 members qualified from the 5th round, bringing them 64 points in total. Adding that to their previous 96 points, they had in total 160 points. The Knight Temple and Mage Temple's qualified member brought them respectively to 105 and 98 total points, ranked 2nd and 3rd. The other 3 temples' total points remained the same, 58 for the Spiritual Temple, 34 for the Assassin Temple, and 24 for the Warrior Temple. At this point, Bright Glimmer of Hope already led by a wide margin, leaving no suspense for who would become champion of the individual competition. Before this gathering, no one could expect the individual competition to end up with such results. There had never been a single temple showing such impressive results in all the past temples' great gatherings. For sure, luck had its role for these results, in addition to the secret help from the Knight Temple they benefited from. But without sufficient strength, there's no way they would have made it so far. Amongst the 4, 3 had domains of their own, and 1 had eliminated a domain-wielding opponent. Be it in technique, strategy, or strength, Bright Glimmer of Hope fully deserved to call themselves a titled Demon Hunt squad. Part 1 end here.